March 21, 1945, Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The early morning mist clung to the dense trees of the Ardennes. The 3rd U.S. Infantry Division was advancing cautiously, following a report that German forces were in retreat. But the forest whispered of hidden dangers, snapped branches, rustling leaves, and faint echoes of distant artillery. Captain Reynolds of Company C scanned the area with his binoculars, noting the odd stillness. "This doesn't feel right," Reynolds muttered, his breath visible in the cold air. Sergeant Morales, his second-in-command, nodded. "Too quiet. The enemy knows we're coming." The men moved in a loose formation, weapons at the ready. Their mission was simple: secure the small village of Vilsheim and push German troops further west. Intelligence reports suggested the Germans were demoralized, but Captain Reynolds had a gut feeling that the retreat was a setup. Suddenly, Private Jenkins froze, pointing ahead. "Movement! I think I see them." Reynolds squinted. In the shadowed undergrowth, he caught glimpses of camouflaged German soldiers, almost invisible against the forest floor. The trees hid anti-tank guns, machine guns, and riflemen, perfectly positioned to strike the Americans at the narrowest point of the road. The sense of calm shattered. Reynolds barked orders. "Fall back! Spread out! Watch the flanks!" But the Germans were already moving. Mortars and artillery fire erupted, sending men diving into mud, smoke, and chaos. The first few casualties fell instantly. The ambush had been meticulously planned, aimed to halt the American advance and create chaos across the European front. The U.S. soldiers scrambled for cover, returning fire where they could. The forest became a killing ground, trees splintered, dirt and debris flying with every explosion, and bullets ricocheting through the undergrowth. Captain Reynolds tried to organize his men into a defensive line, but every path seemed covered. Morales yelled over the roar of gunfire. "They're everywhere! Flanking us from the left!" Reynolds realized this was no ordinary ambush. The Germans had calculated every approach, anticipating the Americans' movements. For a brief moment, despair threatened to take hold. This ambush, if successful, could stall the Allied advance in Western Europe for weeks, giving German forces time to regroup, fortify positions, and possibly alter the strategic balance entirely. Private Jenkins, huddled behind a fallen tree, loaded his rifle, shaking from fear and adrenaline. "Sir, how do we get out of this?" Reynolds took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "We fight our way through. Follow my lead. Keep moving, keep firing." The soldiers pushed forward cautiously, returning fire, tossing grenades into the shadows, and coordinating as best they could under the hail of German bullets. Every step forward was met with resistance, every clearing revealed new threats. The ambushers had prepared pitfalls, tripwires, and hidden foxholes, turning the forest into a labyrinth of death. As the day wore on, casualties mounted, and the Americans were forced to split into smaller units to survive. Reynolds led one group along a narrow ridge, hoping to find higher ground and a vantage point. Morales took another unit to secure the flanks, but progress was painfully slow. Amidst the chaos, an American reconnaissance scout spotted something alarming: a column of German reinforcements moving along a concealed forest road, ready to strike the Americans from the rear. Reynolds' heart sank. If the ambush held, the entire division could be trapped in a deadly pocket. "This isn't just an ambush," he said grimly. "It's a trap designed to destroy us completely." Even in the face of overwhelming firepower, the Americans refused to retreat entirely. They used trees, craters, and fallen vehicles for cover, gradually pulling back while maintaining suppressive fire. Each second bought time, but the cost was high. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, and the German ambushers remained relentless, striking from every angle. By late afternoon, the Americans had made small progress, but it was clear that this day would be remembered as one of the closest brushes with disaster in the European theater. Captain Reynolds knew that unless they adapted, the ambush could stall Allied operations, delay reinforcements, and shift momentum back to the Germans. He gathered his officers briefly behind the shattered remnants of a farmhouse. "We need to break out," Reynolds whispered. "We can't hold like this forever. I want flank attacks, suppressive fire, and someone watching that forest road. We fight smart, or we're finished." Morales nodded. "Understood, sir. We'll do whatever it takes." The Americans prepared for what would become a long, brutal, and strategic battle through the Ardennes, facing one of the most cunning ambushes they had ever encountered. The Americans had spent hours under the relentless hail of German fire. The forest, once quiet and foreboding, had become a maze of smoke, mud, and shattered trees. Captain Reynolds led his men through a narrow ravine, hoping to reach higher ground and gain a vantage point over the hidden German positions. Every step was a gamble. Each fallen tree could conceal an enemy rifleman, every shadow a sniper's target. Sergeant Morales was beside him, shouting orders to keep the men moving. "Stay low! Keep your heads down!" He fired a few rounds toward a suspected foxhole, forcing the German soldier inside to duck. "We can't stop here, not even for a minute. They'll pin us down completely." Private Jenkins stumbled over a tree root, narrowly avoiding bullets slicing past him. "This is insane! How can they see everything?" he shouted. "They've set it up perfectly," Reynolds replied, scanning the terrain. "Every angle, every tree, every slope, they know we're coming. That's why this ambush could destroy us if we don't act smart." The Americans formed a staggered line, moving cautiously forward. Reynolds had realized the only chance to survive was to hit the Germans on their flanks, forcing them to split their fire. The men crawled through mud, smoke burning their eyes, listening for the faint whistle of incoming artillery shells. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. A German machine gun had pinned down a small unit attempting to flank the ambushers. Soldiers dove into craters and behind fallen logs, returning fire when possible. The forest seemed alive, every shadow hiding a deadly threat. Morales yelled over the din. "We need suppressive fire! Take those foxholes on the left!" Reynolds nodded, signaling 2 squads. The men advanced, tossing grenades and firing their rifles in coordinated bursts. The Germans responded with vicious precision, but the Americans' assault forced them to abandon a few positions. Smoke and dust filled the air, and the cries of the wounded echoed across the valley. Private Jenkins spotted a German officer directing fire near a ruined farmhouse. He whispered to Reynolds, "If we take him out, we might disrupt their command." Reynolds considered it for a moment, then signaled, "Hail with me. Everyone else, hold this line. We strike fast and hard." They moved silently, using every tree and crater for cover. As they reached the farmhouse, the officer spotted them and shouted orders. Reynolds fired first, his rifle cracking through the misty morning air. Morales and Hale followed, firing suppressive shots as the officer fell. The small German contingent at that end of the ambush hesitated, disoriented by the sudden loss of leadership. "Push forward!" Reynolds shouted. "Don't let them regroup!" The remaining Americans advanced carefully, clearing hidden trenches and foxholes. Every corner held danger, every tree could conceal a sniper. But with relentless pressure, the ambushers began to fall back, their perfect traps slowly unraveling. Meanwhile, a small German reinforcement column was approaching along a concealed forest road. If they linked up with the ambush forces, the Americans could be completely encircled. Captain Reynolds knew he had to act decisively. "We need to secure that road. If they make it through, we're finished." He sent a reconnaissance squad to intercept the reinforcements, using the cover of trees and smoke. The squad moved silently, rifles ready, eyes trained on the faint movement in the distance. Soon, the reinforcements were engaged, and skirmishes erupted along the forest edges. The Americans fought with fierce determination, aware that survival depended on every successful maneuver. The ambush had been expertly laid, but their discipline and courage were beginning to turn the tide. Every foxhole taken, every sniper neutralized, was a small victory in a forest that threatened to consume them whole. By late afternoon, the ambush had lost much of its initial ferocity. German forces had been forced to retreat from key positions, though sporadic gunfire and hidden snipers still inflicted casualties. Captain Reynolds gathered the surviving men behind a shattered wall. "Look around," he said, voice hoarse from shouting and gunfire. "We've turned their trap into a fight we can survive. But this isn't over. There are still enemy forces in the forest, and they will fight to the last. Stay alert. Move smart. Cover each other." Morales nodded, wiping blood from a gash on his arm. "We're still alive. That's something." Reynolds gave a grim smile. "Yes, alive. But we need more than survival. We need to break out completely. If we don't push them now, they could regroup and strike again tomorrow, or worse, they could stop the entire Allied advance in this sector. That road, those positions, everything, it matters more than life or death right now." As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the trees, the Americans prepared for another grueling push. Each squad checked ammunition, bandaged wounds, and whispered brief prayers. The forest was alive with the echoes of battle, moans of the wounded, the whistle of distant artillery, and the occasional bark of a machine gun. Private Jenkins knelt behind a fallen log, rifle clutched tightly. "I didn't think I'd see the end of this day," he muttered. Reynolds placed a hand on his shoulder. "Neither did I. But we're still here. And as long as we are, we fight. The Germans thought they could trap us completely. They were wrong." The stage was set for a prolonged and deadly confrontation, a fight through the Ardennes forest that could have altered the entire European battlefield. The forest seemed endless. Smoke and haze hung low, twisting around shattered trees and churned up mud. Captain Reynolds led his men cautiously forward, knowing that every step could uncover another hidden threat. The initial ambush had cost lives, but the Americans had survived, and now they had to turn the tables. Morales pointed to a narrow ridge. "If we can take that high ground, we might see their positions and plan a proper counterattack." Reynolds nodded. "Good. We hold there, and we pick them off one by one. Stay sharp." The men moved silently, weapons ready, eyes scanning the shadows. The sounds of battle had shifted, sporadic gunfire, cries of the wounded, and the occasional whine of artillery shells overhead. The ambush, though still dangerous, was losing cohesion. As they climbed the ridge, Reynolds spotted movement, a small group of German soldiers attempting to regroup in a shallow valley below. The Americans opened fire, using the high ground to their advantage. The Germans scrambled for cover behind trees, mud mounds, and destroyed vehicles. "Grenade!" Morales shouted, tossing one into a foxhole where a German sniper had been firing relentlessly. The explosion threw dirt and debris in every direction. For a moment, silence followed. Then gunfire erupted again from another position, signaling the ambushers' resilience. Private Jenkins pressed forward, a look of grim determination on his face. "Sir, they're still holding that line near the clearing." Reynolds scanned the scene. "Hale, take a squad and flank them from the left. Morales, cover the center. I'll move up the right." The Americans split into smaller units, each moving with calculated caution. The Germans, though surprised by the counterattack, fought fiercely. Every foxhole, trench, and fallen log was a potential death trap. The ridge offered a better vantage point, but it also made them visible. German machine guns opened up again, forcing the Americans to dive behind rocks and stumps. "We can't stay still," Reynolds muttered. "We move fast, or we die slow." Hale's flanking maneuver succeeded in taking out one machine gun nest, allowing the center squad to push forward. Smoke, debris, and the occasional flare illuminated the forest in a chaotic mix of shadows. The Americans were gradually dismantling the ambush, but the Germans were relentless, counterattacking whenever possible. Meanwhile, the reconnaissance teams sent earlier to the forest road reported back. A small column of German reinforcements had been halted temporarily, but more were likely en route. Reynolds understood the stakes. If the ambushers were not neutralized, the division could still be trapped, and the European front could suffer a severe setback. The men pressed on, moving from cover to cover, clearing every foxhole and trench they encountered. Private Jenkins found himself face to face with a young German soldier in a dugout. Reflexes took over, rifle shot, then a moment of stunned silence as the enemy fell. He barely had time to register the reality before moving on. Morales shouted from ahead, "Reynolds! They're regrouping near the creek! We need to hit them hard!" Reynolds signaled, and the squads converged on the enemy line. Mortar rounds from the Germans exploded around them, kicking up mud and splinters of wood. Grenades flew, bullets ricocheted, and the sounds of battle created a deafening roar. The Americans advanced relentlessly, knowing that every second counted. By late afternoon, the tide of the ambush was clearly turning. German forces were retreating from key positions, leaving behind equipment, ammunition, and wounded soldiers. The Americans held the ridge and gained control over the forest road. Captain Reynolds finally allowed himself a moment to catch his breath, looking over the devastated landscape. "Good work, men," he said, voice hoarse. "We've turned the ambush into a fight we can win. But stay vigilant. This forest is still deadly, and more enemy forces could be lurking ahead." Private Jenkins, still shaken but alive, muttered, "I thought we were done for." Reynolds gave him a nod. "We weren't done for yet. And as long as we keep moving, we won't be." The Americans spent the evening securing the ridge and fortifying temporary positions. They treated the wounded, counted ammunition, and prepared for the possibility of another German counterattack. Though exhausted and bloodied, they were alive, and they had survived one of the most cunning ambushes of the war. As night fell, the forest seemed to calm, but the Americans knew this was only a temporary respite. Captain Reynolds looked at the shadows stretching across the trees, thinking about the strategic implications. This ambush, if it had succeeded fully, could have halted the Allied advance in Belgium, delayed reinforcements, and potentially changed the course of the European campaign. He gathered his officers briefly. "Tomorrow, we push further. We secure every road, every clearing. We make sure no ambush like this can stop us again. Every step forward is critical for the division, and for the war." Morales nodded grimly. "Understood, sir. We'll finish this." The soldiers settled into the forest for the night, aware that the fight was far from over. But for the first time that day, a sense of hope flickered among them. The ambush had been survived, and now the Americans could begin turning the forest against their hidden enemies. The early morning mist still clung to the Ardennes forest, but the Americans were no longer solely reacting, they were taking control. Captain Reynolds surveyed the ridge, eyes scanning the dense trees below. The ambush that had threatened to trap the 3rd Infantry Division was beginning to falter. German soldiers, though still dangerous, were scattered, and their positions compromised. "Morales," Reynolds said, voice low but firm, "we hit them hard and fast now. They're disorganized. Take your squad down the east flank and cut off any retreat. Hale, follow me through the central path. Jenkins, stay with me and cover fire. Every shot counts." The men moved like a well-oiled machine, using trees, craters, and destroyed vehicles as cover. The forest seemed alive with tension, smoke drifting through shattered pines, the echo of distant artillery, and the occasional bark of a machine gun. As they descended into the valley, they encountered the first real signs of German retreat. Soldiers fled from foxholes and trenches, some surrendering, others firing sporadically. Reynolds' squad advanced cautiously, aware of traps, mines, tripwires, and camouflaged snipers could still strike at any moment. Morales' squad moved swiftly along the eastern flank, intercepting a group of German reinforcements attempting to circle back. Suppressive fire pinned them down while grenades forced them out of hiding. In a matter of minutes, several foxholes were cleared, and German soldiers were either captured or incapacitated. Private Jenkins wiped sweat and grime from his brow, scanning the forest. "They're pulling back, sir. I think we've broken their line." Reynolds shook his head slightly. "Not yet, Jenkins. We've gained ground, but there are still pockets of resistance. Stay sharp." A sudden burst of gunfire erupted from a shattered farmhouse near the creek. German snipers had taken position, aiming at the Americans' advance. Reynolds signaled a flanking maneuver, and his men moved with precision. Grenades lobbed into the windows, gunfire suppressed the defenders, and soon the farmhouse was cleared. The forest was slowly being reclaimed. Hale spotted a German officer rallying troops near a fallen supply wagon. "Captain? He's trying to reorganize them." Reynolds assessed the situation. "Take him out. Disrupt their command, and the rest will scatter." With careful aim and precise movement, Hale and Jenkins neutralized the officer. Chaos erupted among the remaining German soldiers. Without leadership, their counterattacks faltered. The Americans pressed forward relentlessly, each step forward dismantling another section of the ambush. By midday, the ridge and surrounding forest were mostly under American control. The ambush, so meticulously prepared, had been broken. German troops retreated into deeper forests, leaving behind supplies, ammunition, and casualties. Reynolds and Morales regrouped their squads, checking for wounded and reinforcing positions. "This forest is ours for now," Reynolds said, his voice carrying authority over the exhausted men. "But the battle isn't over. We need to secure the area completely before nightfall. Any survivors could return with reinforcements." The men moved methodically, clearing foxholes, searching for mines, and treating the wounded. The forest, which had been a death trap hours before, was now a controlled battlefield. The Americans had turned the tables, showing discipline, courage, and tactical brilliance. Amid the chaos, Reynolds reflected on the larger implications. If the Germans had succeeded, this ambush could have halted the Allied advance in Belgium, delaying reinforcements and altering the European campaign. The Ardennes had been treacherous terrain, and yet the Americans had prevailed through strategy and sheer determination. Morales approached Reynolds, nodding toward the forest road. "Sir, we've secured most positions, but some enemy units are retreating deeper into the woods. Should we pursue?" Reynolds paused, considering. "Yes. But carefully. We push, but we don't overextend. The goal is to break the ambush completely, not get trapped ourselves. Keep squads coordinated, and use the terrain to our advantage." The Americans advanced cautiously, encountering sporadic resistance, snipers, concealed machine guns, and small groups attempting to regroup. Each encounter was met with precision, suppressive fire, and flanking maneuvers. Slowly, the forest that had seemed like a death trap became a path of controlled progression. By evening, the majority of German forces involved in the ambush had either been neutralized or forced to retreat. Captain Reynolds gathered his officers for a brief assessment. "We've survived the ambush, broken their lines, and now control the forest corridor. Tomorrow, we secure the remaining pockets and ensure this sector is safe for the division. This fight was a test, and we passed it." Morales exhaled, tired but relieved. "I never thought we'd make it through that first engagement, sir. But we did. And we've changed the balance here." Reynolds looked out over the forest, the shadows stretching long and dark. "Yes. Today, we survived. But tomorrow, we finish what we started." The men dug in for the night, exhausted and battered but alive. The ambush that had threatened to alter the course of the European battlefield had been broken, thanks to discipline, courage, and tactical ingenuity. The forest was no longer a trap, it was a victory waiting to be consolidated. Dawn broke over the Ardennes forest, the mist clinging stubbornly to the trees. Captain Reynolds and his men were weary but resolute. The ambush had been broken the previous day, but German forces were retreating in scattered groups, attempting to regroup in deeper parts of the forest. Reynolds knew that leaving them unchecked could allow the enemy to stage another deadly trap. "Morales, take your squad along the east flank and push forward carefully," Reynolds ordered. "Hale and Jenkins, you're with me on the central path. We move as a unit, and we don't stop until we've cleared every pocket of resistance." The men moved cautiously, each step through mud, broken branches, and detritus a potential hazard. Every sound, a snapping twig, a rustle in the leaves, could signal hidden snipers or booby traps. The forest that had been their death trap yesterday now became the hunting ground. From the ridge, Reynolds spotted movement in a narrow valley below. A small group of German soldiers, exhausted and disoriented, tried to regroup near the remnants of a destroyed vehicle. "There!" he shouted. "Engage carefully, don't give them a chance to escape." American squads advanced, using cover and suppressive fire to close in. Grenades lobbed into concealed positions sent dirt, splinters, and smoke into the air. Private Jenkins, heart pounding, fired at a foxhole where 2 German soldiers had taken position. Both fell back, retreating into the shadows of the forest. Morales' squad maneuvered through dense underbrush to flank another group attempting to flee. Bullets tore through the branches, echoing across the valley. The Americans coordinated flawlessly, cutting off escape routes while maintaining continuous fire on retreating enemies. The pursuit was grueling. The forest was uneven, with fallen trees, mud pits, and frozen creeks slowing progress. German soldiers, desperate and cornered, set small ambushes along hidden paths, firing sporadically before retreating again. Every skirmish cost lives, but the Americans adapted quickly. Reynolds noticed smoke rising from a clearing ahead. "Possible enemy encampment," he whispered. "We move in quietly, but prepared for a fight." Hale led a small team forward, scanning the area. Hidden foxholes and trenches were revealed as they advanced. The Germans, caught off guard by the relentless pursuit, panicked under well-coordinated American fire. One after another, positions fell, grenades, rifle fire, and tactical maneuvers dismantled the remaining resistance. Amidst the pursuit, Reynolds reflected on the stakes. Had the ambush succeeded fully, the entire Allied advance in this sector could have been halted, giving German forces time to fortify critical positions deeper in Belgium. The Ardennes forest had been perfectly suited for a devastating trap, and the Americans had been lucky, disciplined, and relentless enough to survive. "Keep moving," Reynolds shouted. "No stragglers! Every German soldier we push out weakens their ability to threaten our lines." The men advanced in tight formation, using cover to protect one another. Snipers fired from distant trees, mortars exploded in muddy craters, and the echoes of battle carried across the valley. Yet each American advance was precise, deliberate, and methodical. By mid-afternoon, most German forces involved in the ambush were either neutralized or fleeing further into the forest. Reynolds' men paused briefly near a destroyed bridge to regroup and check casualties. Bandages were applied, ammunition counted, and brief orders shouted over the din of distant gunfire. Morales approached Reynolds, pointing toward a narrow road leading out of the forest. "Sir, if we follow this, we can cut off any remaining retreating forces and secure the sector completely." Reynolds nodded. "Exactly. We push carefully. This is the final phase. We finish clearing the forest, or some of them could slip away and regroup for another ambush. We don't take that risk." The Americans moved again, pursuing the last pockets of German resistance. Occasionally, a soldier would surrender, tired and demoralized. Others were incapacitated, trapped by the relentless advance. The forest gradually became quiet as the remaining Germans scattered, leaving behind their weapons, supplies, and the echo of their failed ambush. As evening approached, the Americans finally reached the edge of the forest. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over a battlefield that had witnessed both the devastating ambush and its decisive dismantling. Reynolds surveyed the terrain. The forest was littered with debris, wrecked vehicles, and evidence of the brutal fight. He gathered his officers. "Today, we not only survived an ambush designed to stop us completely, but we also pushed the enemy out and regained control of the forest corridor. This sector is safe, for now, but we've proven that discipline, courage, and coordination can overcome even the deadliest traps." Morales exhaled deeply. "I never imagined we'd turn the tables like this, sir. But we did. And that might have saved countless lives further down the line." Reynolds nodded, his eyes scanning the fading light. "Yes. What we did here may seem small, but it's critical. The ambush could have altered the European battlefield. Instead, we fought smart, survived, and secured a key position for the division. That's the difference between disaster and victory." The soldiers made camp at the forest's edge, exhausted but alive. Fires burned faintly among the trees, and the wounded were tended with care. The Ardennes had tested them to the limit, but the hidden German ambush had ultimately been defeated. The Americans had survived, learned, and adapted, turning what could have been a catastrophic defeat into a strategic advantage for the Allies. Night fell over the Ardennes forest, the battlefield quiet except for the faint crackle of campfires and the distant echo of artillery from other fronts. The 3rd U.S. Infantry Division had survived a deadly ambush that could have altered the European campaign, but the cost had been high. Captain Reynolds walked among his men, checking on the wounded, offering words of encouragement, and silently acknowledging the bravery he had witnessed. The forest, which had been a perfect trap for the Germans, was now under American control. Trenches had been cleared, foxholes neutralized, and the scattered remnants of the ambushers had fled. The road through the forest corridor, a critical path for reinforcements and supplies, was secure. This small victory, though not widely recorded in official histories, had played a crucial role in maintaining the momentum of the Allied advance. Morales approached Reynolds, still bandaged from earlier skirmishes. "Sir, it's hard to believe we made it through. That ambush, it was nearly perfect. If we hadn't adapted, the entire division could have been trapped." Reynolds nodded. "Exactly. The Germans planned this with precision. Every trap, every sniper, every concealed machine gun was calculated to destroy us. But discipline, coordination, and courage turned the tables. We survived where others might have failed, and in doing so, we kept the front moving." Private Jenkins sat nearby, staring into the dying embers of a fire. "I don't know how to explain it," he said quietly. "I thought we were done for. I thought we'd all die out here in the trees." Reynolds placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You survived, Jenkins. And that matters. Every man who makes it through a battle like this contributes to the bigger picture, the advance of the division, the safety of the supply lines, the momentum of the war itself. Today, we changed history, even if no one else remembers it." The soldiers spent the night consolidating their positions. Temporary barricades were erected, sentries posted, and wounded men tended. Exhaustion weighed heavily, but so did pride. The ambush had tested every skill they possessed: marksmanship, tactical awareness, communication, and bravery under fire. Reynolds reflected on the broader implications. The ambush had been designed not just to inflict casualties, but to halt the Allied advance across Belgium, potentially delaying reinforcements to critical sectors and giving German forces time to regroup. If successful, the operation could have altered the final stages of the European theater. Instead, it had failed. The next morning, the soldiers prepared to move forward. The forest was quiet, almost eerily so, but the Americans remained vigilant. Scouts were dispatched to ensure no hidden pockets of resistance remained, and engineers began clearing obstacles along the forest road. Reynolds stood on a small rise, surveying the landscape. "This forest took many of our men, but we held," he said. "We fought smart, we adapted, and we pushed through. That's what separates survival from disaster." Morales joined him. "Do you think anyone back in command will realize what this ambush could have done if we hadn't survived?" Reynolds shook his head. "Probably not. History often remembers victories, not near disasters avoided through grit and quick thinking. But the truth is clear to us. Every step we took, every move we made, saved lives and kept the division moving. That matters. That's history." The men continued to move forward, leaving behind the scarred forest. Fallen trees, destroyed vehicles, and spent ammunition were all that remained of the ambush. Yet in their hearts, the soldiers carried the memory of what they had endured, the lives lost, and the courage displayed. Private Jenkins looked back one last time. "We survived the ambush. But it feels like the forest itself will never forget." Reynolds nodded. "Nor will we. And that's why we keep moving. The war isn't over, and every road we secure, every forest we clear, brings us one step closer to victory." By the end of March 21, 1945, the Ardennes Forest corridor was secure. The hidden German ambush, which had threatened to trap and destroy the 3rd Infantry Division, had been dismantled. The Americans had survived through a combination of courage, discipline, and tactical brilliance. Though largely forgotten in official records, this engagement played a pivotal role in maintaining the Allied momentum in Western Europe. The ambush might have altered the course of the European battlefield, but the determination of a few brave soldiers ensured it did not. The forest had tested them, but it had not broken them. Captain Reynolds looked at his men, exhausted but alive, and whispered to himself, "We may be forgotten, but today, we change the war."